Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 19, hard to believe, of Duke's Download. And today I am so excited to have Cooper Hefner, who's a friend of mine, a businessman, a candidate for California State Senate, and he just sent me a request to join. It's connecting. So excited to have him on today. Hey, Cooper.
Duke, how are you doing?
It's so good to see you. I'm good. I can't believe I haven't seen you in what, a year and a half now? Which is
Probably.
insane. But I've talked to you, of course, over text and email. But it's so good to see your face.
It's wonderful to see you as well. Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course, yeah. I've been doing this for since the beginning of lockdown, really, and just talking to people in both politics, entertainment, and you come from sort of both worlds. So I thought you'd be the perfect person to talk to. I appreciate you taking the time,
Absolutely.
especially. I mean, you've had this amazing response to the announcement about your campaign. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yes, it's been absolutely wonderful.
It's been, I mean, the press was amazing, and the response, and I can imagine it's been probably interesting to announce a campaign in the middle of like the circumstances that we're going through with COVID.
No question. Absolutely. It's a completely different ball game and brings a very different dimension to just the entire process. This is a first for me, but of course you don't go down the traditional route of canvassing and hosting events, and reaching out to people is very different. Different than when you were running.
I know. I mean, but one thing I've thought about, because I've been hearing about all these fundraisers that like Joe Biden has been doing with Obama, virtual fundraisers that I
Yes.
guess have been raising a lot of money.
Yes.
So, in a way, it limits you in terms of obviously not being able to have in-person fundraisers, but it also means that you're potentially reaching an even bigger audience.
Without question, without question. And we're also seeing that. I work with a number of local and national NGOs. We actually have a family foundation that's focused on civil rights and First Amendment protections. And every single year we do an event in Washington, D.C. that is the First Amendment Awards. And we've spoken just about the nature of having the ability to actually reimagine those, because you get to actually reach an entirely different audience than the types of people who would actually be able to attend an event in the past. And of course, we see the same things with thinking through how to most effectively program and run a successful campaign. You reach a much larger network than you ever could have, because you're not stuck based off of how far people can travel.
And particularly when, and I will talk about this more later, but the fact that, being millennials and, that's having that advantage and having that connection to millennial voters, it's a lot more effective potentially to reach your people, so to speak, that way online. Versus, so in a way, it's it's an effective way to get out to the people that would hopefully support our campaigns, or would support your campaign, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
but before that, I just wanted to say, so I know, begin when around March, April, when this whole thing started, were you in the middle of basic training at that time
Yes.
for the Air Force, the Air Force Reserves, right?
Yes, that's correct. Basic training started December 2019. I actually started the enlistment process about a year before that. That was a fairly heavy lift in a long road. Left and went to Texas in at the end of 2019, and then returned home in April. And of course, the world was an entirely different place. We were
Wow.
in COVID, and that was an interesting experience, being on base and seeing people get that information, and everyone was trying to disseminate and figure out what to do. And uh, there was really, without being critical of the United States Air Force, because it's a wonderful organization and I'm grateful to be a part of it, but it was very clear that there was not a coordinated strategy at the top,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
we all paid the price for that. The United States and the world has paid the price for that. So.
And so how long were you gone during that particular period when you
I was
got
gone
back?
for just under 4 months, and
Wow.
then returned. And the commitment for the reserves is that you are required to be on base 1 weekend a month, and
Hmm.
then 2 weeks out of the year you're required to go and train. That stays the case unless you're moved to active duty, which is dependent on what the requirements of the armed services need.
Wow. So that's an ongoing commitment. I mean, this is, so you said at least 1 week a month for you.
This is an 8-year commitment.
8-year commitment, 1 week a month.
Yeah,
you have to be.
yeah, an 8-year commitment. So
Wow.
you sign a 6 to 8 year contract. I'll be enlisted in the United States Air Force for the next 8 years.
Wow. It's incredible. In the midst of everything else you've got going on, which includes a baby.
Yes,
I mean,
yes. Scarlett and I.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. I know. I would say that at another moment in time, we would probably be getting together and celebrating, but Instagram will have to do for the time being. Scarlett and I are expecting August 28th.
Oh my God, it's incredible. It's
yes.
What, a week and or 2 weeks?
Yes, yes. We're getting down to crunch time. Could be any day.
Unbelievable.
Which I have to give her a shout out because she's on the other side of the house, probably watching this. So.
Well, actually, I love her, and I'm sure she's going to be an amazing mom, and I'm sure you're going to be an amazing dad too.
I appreciate that.
And but yeah, I mean, between military, new baby, campaign. But before I want to get to more of the campaign, I wanted to ask you. You're such a fascinating guy, and I find you're I think you're an incredibly inspiring guy too, because it seems like from such a young age, you always had such a strong sense of purpose and a sense of, wanting to do good and use whatever platform you've had to make a difference. And I think, of course, with your father, who aside from the fact I think he's one of the coolest people that ever lived, a lot of people don't realize necessarily that he really was a progressive pioneer. And, I always really appreciated that he was one of the very early advocates for gay rights way back in the 1950s, and included an essay in Playboy magazine about gay rights, and was criticized for it. And, I know that was something that was really consistent throughout his whole career. But I was curious, like from an early age, did you have a sense of political, social purpose or interest, or like where did that come from early on?
I think it manifested at a later point in time. However, the desire to actually work on solving the challenges that our communities faced was just ingrained in me for as early as I can really remember. And when I transitioned, you were there participating, I think, as a writer when I had launched my company in 2014-15, when I transitioned away from Playboy for a period of time. And for me, while I was interested in building something and fascinated with what it took and really what the process of actually operating a business was, what was really fascinating for me also was to find a way to actually create a platform that was focused on digital media that would provide an opportunity for these different voices to participate in really driving the organization and the brand forward. So whether it was at Playboy or whether it was at Hop, even transitioning after that and selling that company and moving into a primary leadership position at the organization, there was always a sense of finding a way to actually use the resources that I had and where I had come from and the skills that I had in order to improve our community and help other people in the process. So I can't really point to a singular moment of when that materialized, but it's definitely been in the cards, very similar to you. You're somebody else. Not that I think the best way to have this conversation is to, blow smoke the entire time, but I think you're an inspiring person as well. I love the fact that you're doing not just this podcast, but you've engaged so much in your community and in the California community, and have clearly tried to find opportunities to leverage your position to make a difference, a positive difference in people's lives. That's what it's all about. Absolutely.
And particularly given, and when we met, we didn't know what the next few years were going to look like, but I think now more than ever, young people, I posted this recently. Like, I really think other than voting, the most important thing we need people to do right now, young people in particular, is to actually run for office.
I think so as well.
And I think, that's because, particularly given the challenges we have right now, we need new voices. And so that's why one of the reasons I'm really happy that you're doing what you're doing now. But yeah, I mean, like the fact that when you got to Playboy, you made all of these, or you were part anyway of the team that made these huge changes. The fact that you had a lot more, I know, LGBT people on staff. I remember you invited me to one of the Pride events that Playboy did at the offices. The fact that you had an LGBTQ executive editor. The fact that I don't know if you were on the team when this happened, but it was more recent. But you were probably part of the trend that they recently had their first transgender cover model.
Yeah, that was a decision that I made. Yes.
I mean, that's a huge deal. And
Well, I saw those decisions as being very synergetic with the original mission of the organization, right?
mm-hmm.
Which, to the point that you made, I think oftentimes there are these other details that take up a lot of the oxygen in the room because of the nature of the organization and the business itself. In reality, there is so much more that the company has done, whether it's in the civil liberties space and actually advocating for a healthy interpretation of sex in society, that for me was so much motivation as to why I engaged outside of my personal connection to the organization and the brand. So it felt synergetic as well as very natural to continue that process of pushing and encouraging and leveraging the organization to be a leader in so much of the conversation around the LGBTQ plus community and the sex space and civil liberties today. And I hope, even though I'm not engaged in a management capacity at the organization anymore, that the company continues to stay true to that role.
Absolutely. And another thing which is pretty iconic, I think, is the fact that you used to say entertainment for men at the top of the magazine, and now it says entertainment for all.
Well, I will tell you, and this is it's a strange moment to bring her up just because of the press that's being generated around her and the conversation around cancel culture. But in a very strange way, Ellen was partially responsible for that. And not even, I don't know her personally, but I remember her posting something about the organization a very long time ago. She participated as a bunny in the Las Vegas club for a promotion, but she was always a huge fan of the organization. And we were having a conversation internally at the company, and I remember thinking to myself, I recognize that we are focused on delivering content and a brand that focuses on driving a narrative to a heterosexual male. That was traditionally the case. However, there were so many other people who identified and found a home within what was built at Playboy, and the company had so far grown outside of that being the focus, delivering product and actually creating content that did speak to those individuals as well. So my thought was, well, Ellen and her wife Portia should be able to go to a Playboy party and find a place that is just as comfortable and meaningful for them as somebody who is a male that is straight. And again, that message was not necessarily a reflection of the fact that the organization wasn't already focused on delivering product and an experience for different people who had different sexual appetites and different interests from a lifestyle and news perspective. But it was more of a statement that we knew that that was the case, and we wanted to make sure that we were declaring that we were going to focus on creating a business that was inviting to all, not just a handful of people.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And I think, I mean, like, I always felt Playboy was a progressive brand. And I remember my dad always used to say to me as a kid, like, before I came out, he would always be like, Playboy, you don't just look at it for the pictures, actually read the articles, because it really has always been a very political brand.
Yes, it has.
But
it has.
What's the word I was looking for? And proudly so, like without any sort of defiantly so, whether it was on gay rights or civil liberties or whatever else.
Well, there was more of an understanding that this has always been interesting from my perspective, that there are people who really don't want to talk about politics. I recognize that it's challenging, and we sort of come from this generation of a number of people. However, your parents are different, and so are mine. But there are a lot of people who grew up who did not believe that dinner should be spoke or politics should be spoken about at the dinner table. From my particular perspective, when you really take a step back, you realize that whether you want to talk about politics or not, politics and law and the debate really is focused on exploring what we value and what we don't as good and bad, right? That's sort of the focus of government, is to determine the rules of the world that we live in. So you can't have a conversation about sex and sexuality and civil liberties and the rights of the individual as well as the rights of the group if you're not willing to talk about politics. And it is a fundamental driving force of what allows for all of us to live the lives we want to live. So we can choose to ignore it, but ignoring it is ultimately doing a disservice, not just to ourselves, but the people who we love and our neighbors.
Totally. And people forget that your dad, as well as other people at the time, that were trying to advocate for more freedom and more less censorship, that a lot of the roadblocks that they dealt with were government, officials that were saying, based on the laws, this is blasphemy or whatever else, that, both because of the photos, but also just the content, the articles that were advocating for civil rights and for gay rights and women's rights. They were trying to use the government to try to suppress that. And so, that magazine arguably would not have even existed if a lot of people had had their way. And so, it's important to have people in government that are advocating for more transparency and more openness and less censorship. And obviously with Trump, we're dealing with a lot of those same kinds of issues.
Yes.
And so actually, as part of that, I was curious how, and obviously running for office, but how did the military decision play into that? Like, what point did you decide that was a way that you wanted to participate and to serve the country?
Oh, I've always wanted to serve. I don't think that this is something that is unique to my experience, but there are a lot of people out there who romanticize joining the armed services and wanting to be a part of something larger than themselves. That was certainly the case for me when I was transitioning out of high school. Truth be told, if Playboy had not been a bridge, I probably would have found a branch and joined and spent a great deal of time in active duty. A lot of that manifested. I had a unique number of opportunities to interact with different members of law enforcement and different people who served throughout the years when I was younger, and just had a tremendous amount of respect for the decision that they made to rise to this more meaningful occasion. So for me, finding the time to do that at some point was really important to me. And it was one of those interesting sort of decisions that you ultimately can find every excuse not to, and you got to just find the time to do it. And I'm really grateful that I did, and it's been incredibly challenging, but unbelievably rewarding.
And in terms of challenging, I mean, I know what you mean, but do you mean more primarily, do you mean the physical aspect? Do you mean what is the mental component of that? Like, what has it been like? Because I can't even imagine.
Basic training is challenging in the sense of being away from your wife when she's pregnant is difficult. I have not been activated and have not gone on a deployment, but I have so much respect for members of the armed services who do go and are spending long periods of time away from their loved ones. That is a tremendous sacrifice that a lot of people do not really understand and relate to unless you experience it. And I will tell you that, a typical deployment for the United States Air Force is about 6 months. The other branches are longer. Spending a little under 4 months away from my wife was incredibly challenging. So there's that component to it that I think is missed by a lot of people. And I hope that when individuals are thinking folks for their service who are serving, they're thinking not just about the fact that a number of these people are putting their lives in danger in order to serve their country, but they're also making a decision that is taking them away oftentimes from their family, which is another great sacrifice that is par for the course. But it is just when I say wonderfully rewarding and challenging, it was a new world for me, like everyone else who's going there. And it was difficult. And then you move after basic training to tech training. So basic is very much the qualifications that you get, firearms training and the traditional military experience. And then tech training is really what you're specifically hired to do for your job. That timeline of those actual of that training is going to differ depending on what the United States Air Force or any other branch is requiring that you do. So some people are gone for over a year. Some people are gone for a couple of weeks.
And where were you based at for most of your, like the last 4 months when you were away?
Texas. Lackland Air Force Base is where everyone who joins the United States Air Force on the enlisted side goes and trains.
Oh,
and
wow,
then,
I didn't know that.
yes, and then following basic training, they are sent to a different base, and then they go through tech training. And then after their tech training, you receive your orders, and you're sent to the base that you are going to be stationed at for whatever period of time the mission requires. So for me, because I was in the reserves, after I finished tech training, I am moved to civilian status. My base is March Air Force Base, which is about an hour and a half from Los Angeles. I report there every time I'm required to report, and then I go back to my civilian life.
Wow. Incredible. Well, thank you for your service, seriously.
Well, James,
I,
you should do it. I hate to put pressure on you, but it's a wonderful experience.
honestly, I've been told before, like, especially when I
No,
was younger, my parents were like, get in the military, you should go to the military.
no,
Like,
I'm just kidding.
seriously, I respect people like you and people like, for instance, Pete Buttigieg. It requires, and I think it really does lend itself, in terms of like, it gives you the right skills that I think people in public service and public office need, because it requires a lot of discipline, I imagine. And a lot of, you obviously have to really believe in what you're doing. And I
It
think
also
that's,
I think that's the more important note. Yes, it certainly is a teacher of discipline, but it allows for you to understand that you're a part of something much bigger than yourself. And you may believe in that and hold that in your heart, but when you go away and you train with individuals, and every day you're waking up and understanding that you've made a decision that is so far beyond you, there is a humility that comes from that experience that is really, really impossible to explain outside of actually going through the process.
mm-hmm. Oh no, I mean, there's plenty I can't even imagine. It must be, in some ways, it must also be a hard experience to try to explain, to people in a lot of ways. But look, I know you've been interested in public service and politics for a long time, but I actually, and I knew that you'd hinted that you thought you might run for office in the future. But at what point did you decide that like that particular office, that the 30th district was something that you were interested in potentially pursuing?
I see that I really do find connections to the decision to run for public office and the desire to serve constantly. It's interesting because I've gotten a number of notes, overwhelmingly have been positive, but a few folks have felt as though that the decision to serve in the armed services and then pursue a career and actually pursue the road of potentially elected office, those two decisions are not synergetic and should be separated. I could not disagree more. I think that whether I'm successful in this race or not, and I certainly believe that we will be, and the support that we've seen so far is an indication of that, which has just been wonderful. But the decision to actually run and make a difference in California and in our communities, local, specifically around Los Angeles County, is very much connected to the desire to serve. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And I love how you said on your website, speaking of that, I think it was in the about section or the issues section where you said how the biggest thing that people should avoid, given everything going on, is complacency. and how you're
Oh,
firmly
yes.
against complacency. And I think, that really resonated with me, because I think, especially given everything going on, we have so many challenges. Even people that disagree with me, I'd rather they have an opinion at least than be disengaged. Because when I see people, given everything going on, that are disengaged, I go like, how can you not to be affected or be in some way moved by everything going on in the country right now? And that just kind of blows me away when still I meet people who are like, oh yeah, like, I don't really follow politics. I'm like, how is that possible, given everything going on?
No, I think it's very heavy. I understand why people disengage. I think it's very heavy, and also people are disillusioned with the system. Um, it's not it's a very difficult time for a lot of people, and folks are trying to find opportunities to relax, and they don't want to be burdened with the challenges that the world is facing right now every single day. But I am a firm believer that complacency is a disease that we should get rid of. And I think everyone comes from a different lot in life and comes with skills and experiences and different resources, whether that's the ability to donate their time or donate their capital or provide something else. There is a way that we can help correct the wrongs that have been done over the last couple years, and we all have a collective obligation to step up and find a way how we can participate in that.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of that, like, what are the issues that you would say you're most concerned about? And being a millennial, are there particular millennial specific issues that you feel haven't been necessarily addressed by other politicians?
Yes, yes. There are a number of issues that that are a focus for me and our campaign. The homelessness crisis in Los Angeles is something I've been constantly talking about as we have continued to do press, and we've been spending a great deal of time making sure that we're mapping out a well-organized plan of action that connects to our policy platform. The issue has consistently gotten worse over the years, from 2018 to 2019 and 2019 to 2020. We've seen a 10% increase and a 12% increase. There's over 60,000 homeless men and women in Los Angeles. It's a major issue, and really the problem starts with us actually having a conversation of how to invest in permanent housing, and then also is rooted in the truth that we don't provide enough health resources to individuals who suffer from mental illness. So it's a multi-pronged approach. Homelessness specifically in California is the biggest issue. And then COVID-19, the fact that we're going to see so many families and so many individuals default on mortgages and their rent is a cause for concern and requires organization at a federal level that has just been lackluster and disappointing. So my hope is that we all continue to hold not just our local and state officials responsible for stepping up, but that we continue to call for the federal government to actually take action and come up with a very clear plan to ensure that the homelessness crisis that we've been dealing with in California, but also other states have been dealing with, is not exacerbated, which quite frankly is that's the road that we're walking down. And then I think from a larger level, sort of at a macro level, I'm really interested in changes that are happening in specific industries that allow for there to be an introduction of innovation. Specifically, one example that I can point to, which is connected to the climate crisis and addressing climate change and moving us away from fossil fuels, is solar electricity in the next several decades is going to be in nearly all of our homes. And the government can certainly provide assistance in driving us to a world where we are minimizing the amount that we pay monthly for a utility that is not free today, right? One can start to think through, with solar electricity introduced, how that would impact the everyday American family, how that would impact the everyday Californian family. You would essentially dramatically lower the amount that you pay currently for a service that is not free. That that provides us the ability to actually provide a service to low-income households and low-income families that do not have that today. Am I back?
Yeah, you are. You're
Can you hear
back.
me?
Yep, we're good. Can you
Okay.
hear me? Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
yes. There are other changes to agriculture. Vertical farming is going to allow for there to be a dramatic decrease in the actual produce and goods that we produce, and allow for us to, and when I say us, I mean government, to provide at low cost uh, goods and food to lower income houses. I share these two examples, and there are a number of others, because it paints a picture of a 21st century world that we don't actually live in, but we could live in if we want to live in it. And we get there by actually electing individuals who understand how to and who want to invest in areas to move us forward and create a very different, quite frankly, society than what existed over the last 100 years. So I think that there is, if we can get our ducks in order and we can support people who are actually focused on the right things, we can build something really spectacular in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years. And that is exciting to me.
I think what's scary is that a lot of the issues that you outlined and the problems we have, homelessness, affordable housing, you know, those issues that were already big challenges are now getting even worse because of COVID. You know, a bit like I just know in my local community in West Hollywood, local small businesses that were already having a tough time as it is. Restaurants, you know, like in fact, one of my favorite restaurants, which closed down last year, we were like, oh, you know, not, I mean, of course it's sad, but had it not closed last year, it would definitely be gone now because of, you know, this situation. And so, you know, a lot of people that were already, you know, living close to the poverty line are now there and or below the line.
Half of the workforce in the United States. I mean, again, these are staggering statistics. Half of the workforce in the United States is unemployed. Right? All of the information that we have today is suggesting that over 40% of the jobs that are responsible or were connected to individuals who are now unemployed are not returning. If we are believing that we are not going to have to build a new world based off of where we are today, then we are not acknowledging the world that we're actually in. But it's important that we identify the opportunities. And there is a tremendous amount of opportunity for us to improve the lives of many while making sure that we are creating a structure that allows for there to be the world that actually was.
Mm-hmm. No, I love the way, I've never heard it said quite that way, and I think it's so compelling the way you said, you know, this is the 21st century we could have, but we don't currently, but we could if that's the world we wanted to live in. And I think that's such a great way to look at it, and it's inspiring. And I would just ask you, you know, with the election 3 months away, the 2020 election, I know you're running in 2022, but for this election, are you feeling optimistic? Are you feeling scared? Are you feeling are you feeling dread about November? I mean, the thing is, I always say I'm not so worried necessarily if Biden's going to win. My fear, and I think you did a tweet about this today or just yesterday, was my fear is what's going to happen after with, you know, if the mail-in voting system is undermined, if it's a close election and Trump tries to say, you know, this is not a legitimate election, I'm not leaving. I'm more afraid of that November to January period, and so I'm feeling a sense of real dread about the next 6 months. You know, I
I
don't know.
I I feel very optimistic. I am every single day I have the greatest amount of concern that I have ever had in my life about people who I know that are suffering and people who I don't know that are suffering. And I have consistently with my wife tried to do everything that we can to support individuals in ways that allow for them to find comfort and success in this. And I think we all need to be asking ourselves how we can do that effectively when it comes to the actual election. What we need to do is make sure that we're using our voices. And I know it sounds cliche, but there's a wonderful quality to social media that allows for us to organize effectively. And as long as we remain organized and people are sharing their dismay and are actually supporting and moving us away from the divisiveness of the current administration, I have faith that things will pan out in a very positive way.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great to hear, and it comes across, and you know, it's good to hear optimistic, and people like you who have a vision and, you know, who have a plan to make things better. And so I wish you the best of luck. I'm so excited and thrilled for you, and not just for your new career as a public servant, but also for your upcoming fatherhood.
No, thanks, James.
And I hope that we get to see each other in person soon.
I do too. I do too.
I mean, who knows how long this is going to last, but you know, in the meantime, great to see you on here, and talk very soon.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me, James.
And my mom and dad send their love too.
Send my love to them as well.
I will. Have a good
All
night,
right.
and best
Bye
to
bye.
Scarlett too.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye.